Good evening, and welcome to the AJP closing brief. One set of American earnings released after the New York bell moved all three Northeast Asian markets today, and it moved each one in proportion to how close it sits to the memory chip. The catalyst was identical everywhere. After Wall Street closed, the cloud provider CoreWeave and the server maker Super Micro both reported stronger than expected results, confirming that spending on artificial intelligence infrastructure has not slowed. Korea, whose index is essentially a leveraged bet on two memory makers, moved first and hardest. The KOSPI closed up nearly 4%, and the exchange had to halt program buying mid-session. Japan, which sells the tools and the materials rather than the memory itself, rose less than 1%. China barely registered the news. The Shanghai Composite added less than 0.5% because China's artificial intelligence trade does not live on the Shanghai mainboard. It sits on the STAR market and on Chinex, and both rose several times faster. The KOSPI closed at around 6,579, up more than 230 points. Just before noon, the Korea Exchange triggered a buy-side sidecar, halting program buying for 5 minutes after the futures index jumped more than 5%. The flow split is a real story. By early afternoon, foreign investors had bought roughly 2 trillion won of Korean stock on a net basis, with institutions adding close to another trillion, while retail investors sold more than 2.5 trillion won into the rally. It was also narrow. The KOSDAQ finished close to flat, while the main board surged. Samsung Electronics and SK hynix alone account for roughly 44% of the KOSPI's market value. Samsung Electronics closed at around 255,500 won, about $181, up nearly 7%. SK hynix finished at around 1,504,000 won, roughly $1,065, up more than 5%. The largest move belonged to SK Square, the holding company that owns the hynix stake and operates no fabs of its own, at around 1,024,000 won, about $725, up more than 8%. Pure leverage, no factories. The Shanghai Composite closed at around 3,949, up less than 0.5%, and that number understates the day. The semiconductor and computing hardware chains did rally, with optical modules, lithography, and circuit board names leading, and the Star 50 gauge up about 2%. None of those are mainboard stocks. What the mainboard carries is banks, coal, power, and oil, and every one of those sectors was weak. Industrial and Commercial Bank of China closed at around 7.52 yuan, down about 1%. Wuxi Aptec, the contract research group and one of the board's largest healthcare names, finished at around 159 yuan, down just under 1%. The biggest mainboard mover was Baihua Pharma, at around 14 yuan, up the daily limit of 10%. The company itself published a trading risk notice this month after 3 straight limit-up sessions, stating that nothing in its business had changed and warning shareholders about overheated speculation. A large-cap drug developer down, a small speculative name up the limit. That is Shanghai's version of an artificial intelligence rally. The Nikkei 225 closed at around 67,524, up more than 550 points, almost 1% after opening flat and spending the morning slightly lower. The revealing detail is which names did the work. Advantest, the chip tester maker that is normally Tokyo's cleanest read on global artificial intelligence demand, closed at around 34,550 yen, up less than 1%, barely more than the index itself. The bigger moves came from companies one step removed from the chip. Mitsui Mining and Smelting closed at around 29,000 yen, up about 4%. It makes the ultra-thin copper foil used in artificial intelligence servers, and its latest quarterly operating profit rose more than 80% from a year earlier. Recruit Holdings finished at around 16,660 yen, up about 3%, extending a run that began with earnings last Friday, showing operating profit up 2/3. The stock went limit up on Monday, gaining nearly 23% to a record and pushing its market value past Sony's into Japan's 10 largest companies. Japan's artificial intelligence trade has migrated away from the chip itself into the materials around it and the software that monetizes it. Korea got the biggest move today for the same reason it takes the biggest losses on bad days. Less than a week ago, one disappointing memory revenue forecast from a single American supplier knocked more than 4% off the KOSPI in a session. Concentration is an asset on days like this and a liability on days like that, and nothing structural changed today. The open question is whether the foreign buying holds. It arrived ahead of the American inflation report, not after it, which means today's conviction has not yet been tested. We will be back tomorrow with the region's response to that inflation data and with whether Korea's foreign buyers stayed a second session. Subscribe for daily coverage of Korean, Chinese, and Japanese markets. Thank you for watching AJP.